Well, hey there, guys. I'm Axel the Beast of ZeldaDungeon.net, and the topic of this video is, as the title, that's right up there, should be telling you, it is guns in Zelda. Now, yeah, I know, big debate, really controversial, kind of like, I mean, just something most people would hear me say that and just go, ugh, no! And, I am actually going to just get my actual stance on this out of the way, because most of this video is going to be me addressing specific arguments about the topic. But my actual stance on it, I've hinted at this in the last article, well, not the last article, the article before the last one that I wrote, which was 5 terrible reasons to hate Zelda and 5 terrible reasons to love it. And in that one, I briefly mentioned that, or implied, you might have gotten that if you were reading the article, that I thought the idea of hating guns in Zelda was kind of a stupid idea. And, that's kind of true. I actually don't think there's any good argument against it. I think there'd be nothing wrong with it. It wouldn't really change anything. It wouldn't be a bad thing. I just don't really specifically, like, push for it or care for it. I mean, I'm indifferent. I think it's something that could be good, but I don't think it could be bad. It's just, it might be cool. Maybe, I mean, it's just be interesting to see, but I have no particular interest in specifically seeing it. I just wouldn't mind if they put it in. So, without any further stalling, I'm going to start diving into arguments I've heard against it that I just think are completely not correct. They're just not, they make no sense, they're not true, and they don't disprove it as a good idea. The first one I want to talk about is people saying that they don't want the guns to replace the sword because they want the sword to stay. Simply put, no one is arguing this. I mean, it's the worst point on the list, so I'm getting it out of the way. No one I have ever seen support guns in Zelda has ever actually said they wanted to replace the sword with the guns. Ever. I've never seen this. If it does happen, they're stupid. Okay, yeah, the sword's gotta stay in Zelda, but I've simply never seen this, and it's not what I'm saying either. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is a completely off-topic argument. It has absolutely nothing to do with this. The next one is that it would change the gameplay. I've specifically seen the argument that it would become a first-person shooter. Why would you think this? I mean, Zelda already has ranged weapons. You have the bow, you have magic, projectile weapons. There's all kinds of things that shoot projectiles or attack from a distance, and it's Zelda. It's always been that way. Literally, the first Zelda game had the bow and the magic wand, both ranged weapons. The first Zelda game that defined the Zelda formula that every other game has followed, and every other, subsequent redefining game of the series, like Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time, debatably anyway, every single Zelda game that supposedly defined or redefined the core gameplay of the series, that is exactly what you don't want changed by ranged weapons, had ranged weapons. So, like, why is a gun so magically different from every other ranged weapon that exists already in the Zelda series that it could somehow completely turn it into another genre of video game? I mean, I've even heard people argue that even in the face of this argument that I'm presenting right now, I've literally said these same things to them, and they still insist that it has to be some kind of change in genre, that it has to become a shooter, a first-person shooter, or maybe a rail shooter, or some kind of shooter, as if the idea that you actually shoot in the game at any point automatically means it's a shooter. That's not how it works. Darksiders is a game that is often considered a Zelda clone, or at least have severely heavy Zelda influences, and it has a gun. And it plays like Zelda. Devil May Cry is another game. It's an action game. The combat isn't like Zelda, but it's vaguely similar. I mean, you still have locking onto enemies and attacking them with strikes, usually melee strikes. But in that game, you can actually whip out a gun and shoot at things, and it is not a shooter. It is not a first-person shooter, certainly. We've had ranged weapons in Zelda. We have ranged weapons in a lot of games, and they're not shooters, and they're certainly not first-person shooters. It simply wouldn't change the gameplay. Yeah, maybe the gun would be a little different. Maybe it would tweak the controls or how the ranged weapon would work a little. It would be a unique item, probably. Unless it was like a 2D Zelda game, the overhead ones, at which point it would probably function literally exactly like a bow. It would just simply shoot up, down, left, or right, and it would be the same exact thing. But in a 3D game, it would probably control a little differently, but the core gameplay wouldn't change. It just simply wouldn't. The next argument is that the guns are too violent for Zelda. Yeah. This is along the same lines, because why would Nintendo change this? Guns don't change the amount of violence any more than they change the type of gameplay. Now, that might sound odd, depending on who's watching this video. I'm sure some of you think that sounds a little strange, but I'll explain. I mean, think about this. Really think about this, okay? A sword. When you fight with a sword, you have to stab and slice. Now, you're stabbing and slicing. You're going to be cutting in to, other people or creatures. You're going to be lacerating them, making humongous cuts, right? You're going to probably be dismembering them. I mean, if they're not going to die in one fatal blow through, like, their heart or their throat or something like that, they're going to be dismembered or just cut up until they bleed out. There's going to be blood everywhere, okay? That's more violent than a gun, which is just one shot, one bleeding hole. Not even like a big cut, it's just one hole. You've got a bow, okay? And yeah, you think, oh, like, a gun's still more violent. No, it's not really, because a gun is, again, a one hole, one clean, well, relatively clean wound. Whereas a bow is a arrowhead that slices and tears, and actually often arrows can't even, like, unless you're a really good shot, arrows aren't even going to kill as often as a gun is. So what you got is a guy who's still going, still alive, getting repeatedly shot with arrows and stuck full of arrows. So you have guys stuck full of arrows, bleeding and cut. That's more violent than a gun. How about, like, the ball and chain or the hammer? You're going to be smashing people. You're going to be crushing bone. You're going to be crushing organs. You're going to be, like, you could probably, like, just, like, some small creatures, you'd probably just they'd pop. That's more violent than a gun. How about bombs? Even in modern day perspective, bombs are generally considered about, like, even more, if not about as violent and horrible as guns are. And yet you have bombs in Zelda games all the time. You throw bombs, you blow stuff up, you throw bombs at enemies, you just blow stuff up. And, that's burning, severe burning, like, complete incineration and obliteration of a tissue. And you can also blow people away across large distances, and that's blunt trauma too. So that's more violent than a gun. These weapons are more horrible and gory than guns, which usually kill pretty cleanly. And they're all in Zelda. And none of them are gory in Zelda because Zelda is an E-rated game and they toned it down. Nintendo toned it down because they didn't want the game to be violent, so when they put weapons in the game, all weapons of which are violent, by the way, they toned it down because it's not supposed to be a violent game. Why would they do any different with a gun? The next one's pretty hilarious. This one is the topic of advanced technology. Guns are too advanced because, they're not medieval weapons. Forgive me if I glance down a lot because there's a lot of specific information I need to make sure I'm referencing correctly, not maybe incorrectly out of my head, so I will be glancing at my notes a lot for this one because it's long. But, Zelda is, first of all, before I get into that, Zelda really is a hodgepodge of a lot of different cultures and time periods. I mean, you really have a lot of elements of different things mixed together. But, first and foremost, people say that it is a medieval fantasy. I get that. But, boomerangs, those are like Aboriginal toys. They're not even weapons. They don't even work as weapons. Now, I've been countered on that before, but the fact is, boomerangs, as seen in Zelda, are simply not weapons. Absolutely, that is fact. There are variations of the same kind of design, usually bigger, sometimes with blades on them, that actually are used as weapons, usually hunting tools. They don't really come back, though, and they are called something different. It's a boomerang, but it's not a boomerang. It's a completely different thing. Additionally, like, you have the trains and whatnot. Those are invented way later in, like the 18th century. Those are not medieval. They're not medieval Europe period. It's simply, these are things that deviate from the medieval period. Even Skyward Sword is a great example of this because they have tons of technology and stuff that just doesn't match up with medieval period at all. Simply, not at all. Bottom line is, since it's a hodgepodge, it doesn't really matter if they add a little out-of-place technology because a lot of elements in the series are out of place. That said, if you want to attack it from the technology perspective, that still gets pretty hilarious because, think about the hookshot. You're fine with the hookshot, right? The hookshot isn't even possible to replicate with modern technology. You simply can't have that chain. Like, think about that. How does the chain shoot out? How does it shoot out with enough force to go across a large distance in a straight line? And how does it have enough force to retract a freaking person worth of weight to a target straight? That can't be done. Not even with, like, motorized electronic technology, and it's not any of that. It's an impossible construction. Literally, if you don't believe me, go ahead and look for it. Find a hookshot. Find technology that could be used to make a hookshot. Oh, wait. Better yet is the actual history of firearms, and this is where I'm going to be referencing my notes a lot. You see, people say the train is too advanced. Steam engines were invented, I believe, in the 18th century, like I said before. The steam engine is what's used in Spirit Tracks. The rifle was invented, or at least the earliest practical applications that people can find, because it's a little hard to track down, the earliest practical applications came from the 15th century. The medieval period is the, that is the 5th century to the 15th century. So quite literally, rifles specifically are medieval weapons. But it's even better, because that's just rifles. Firearms in general, specifically, date back to 12th century China. Guns have been around for a large portion of the medieval period. They are quite literally medieval weapons. But seriously, think about it. You have an immense, complex machine with tons of moving parts, real high-powered, an energy source that weighs a ton and can travel at high speeds. And then you have a pipe with a metal thing inside it that explodes inside and shoots a metal thing out of it, which is more advanced. Now, to be fair, when people are talking about the technology thing, they're probably thinking of, like, mentally picturing a modern handgun or, like, an assault rifle, things like that. But that's simply not what people are talking about. I mean, that's modern-day Zelda or futuristic Zelda, and a lot more people are against that. The idea of a gun in general would probably involve a gun that actually fits in the medieval period that Zelda generally portrays. And as such, what you really want to be looking at is, well, just search on Wikipedia for hand cannons or muskets. That's generally what people are talking about and looking at. If you really, I mean, that's really what would be most likely to see in Zelda. Old-fashioned firearms. And, you know, to be fair, I get it that there's a stigma on firearms. I mean, there's actual real-world violence going on. You know, bows and, you know, stereotypically old-fashioned and medieval weapons. You know, they have that, people only associate with them with fantasy, really. You only think about them, like, as not something that you wouldn't see in real life, whereas guns, you actually do see them, so they are a little more real and a little more, they bother people more. I get that, but, you know, in reality, there's no difference, and it really doesn't seem like it's fair or rational to let it get in the way of the creativity of the series to allow them to use something that is really no different than what they actually already have. Not historically, not practically, and not in terms of style or theme, you know? And I just think it's something that they should not be holding the series back from. It wouldn't hurt the series, and most of the concerns wouldn't really be that big of a deal. That means the main thing left is if you just don't like the idea, you just doesn't personally appeal to you to have a gun in Zelda. And actually, this is the one I can't argue with. If you think it sounds like it just wouldn't work, there's nothing I can do to convince you that. I mean, I disagree, but if you know, that might be true. Maybe it just wouldn't be as cool to you as seeing the other stuff that they could do other than guns. I do implore that you seriously consider the points I've raised and consider if maybe the reason you don't think it would be cool is because of some of these misconceptions. But if you still settle on that, there's still nothing that can be said to convince you away from that, and if so, then I guess it's just a agree to disagree sort of situation. Either way, I don't really care particularly. I don't think that it should be Zelda should be restricted from not having guns. Restricted to, from having guns, excuse me. But I do think it would be cool to see sometime. I mean, I'm always about Zelda trying a couple new things and having one game be a little different from all the others. And I don't mind, but I don't really particularly need to see guns in Zelda. I just don't like all the arguments surrounding it, and I wanted to address that. So, that's pretty much the end of the video. So, if you have any thoughts you'd like to give, you want to yell at me? Absolutely yell at me. I love being yelled at. If you agree, you'd love to hear that too, or if you just have additional thoughts on the subject, it'd be very interesting to hear from you. See you guys later.